Captain Stevens hadn't slept in 36 hours.
Not since the warp malfunction, anyway. The UES Harbinger, a survey-class vessel no larger than a cargo shuttle, was never meant to travel outside the Sol system. Its mission: catalog asteroid belts around Jupiter, scan Martian subsoils for ancient microbial fossils, then return home, clean, boring, routine, until the warp core twisted reality. A freak ionic storm struck mid-jump, warping their exit trajectory. One moment they were on the far side of Neptune, the next, gasping, blinking, the stars themselves had changed. The constellations were wrong. Wrong in a way that made the ship's AI, Veda, quietly disable the star map overlays because human minds weren't supposed to see that kind of displacement. They were, somehow, billions of light years away from Earth. That was the start of it. Then came the encounter. The alien ship had approached slowly at first, sleek, black, almost featureless, but radiating malice like heat off metal. No communications, no warning. Just one unprovoked blast of white-hot energy that peeled a chunk of deck plating off the Harbinger's port side like opening a sardine tin. Stevens ordered return fire. By miracle or malfunction, they struck something critical. The alien ship detonated in an oddly quiet explosion. No sound, just a ripple through space-time, like watching a scream in a vacuum. The crew cheered. They shouldn't have. Now they were behind a gray moon orbiting a pale blue gas giant, hiding, making emergency repairs, trying to catch their breath. "I don't like this," whispered Chief Engineer Ramirez, crouched by a wall panel on Deck C. "Captain, the hull's changing." Stevens scowled. "Elaborate." Ramirez looked up, her fingers twitching. It's breathing. I touched the wall near the coolant line and it flexed, like it wanted to pull me in." Stevens opened his mouth, but before he could respond, the intercom crackled to life.
"Security report. 2 crew members unaccounted for. Last seen near Maintenance Junction 7B. No logs, no life signs."
They initiated a ship-wide search. Every corridor scanned, every room opened, no trace. Except Lieutenant Graves found something. "Captain," he said, pale and sweating, leading Stevens to the aft sector. "Look." The wall near the missing crew's quarters bulged outward, a blister of metal throbbing faintly. "Wasn't there yesterday?" Graves whispered. It's warm." Stevens reached out despite himself and jerked back. The wall shivered, like it liked being touched. Veda began glitching. Voice modulation stuttered. The UI displayed organic patterns that resembled nerve tissue. The crew couldn't explain it, but they all felt it. The Harbinger was becoming something else. Then came the transmission. The console beeped twice. Static. Then a voice. Translated, but dripping with amusement. "Having trouble with your ship, Captain?" Stevens stood frozen. "Identify yourself." More static. Then a chuckle. Unmistakable sarcasm even through the filters. "You killed one of our drones. A mistake, but understandable. You're unevolved. Fearful. Your ship now bears our presence. A gift. Let us see what you do with it." Stevens leaned forward. "You infected our ship. With what?" No reply. Just a clicking noise. Wet. Metallic. Like bone over metal. By day 5, the Harbinger was no longer a ship. Not entirely. Corridors shifted slightly when you weren't looking. Doors opened to places that didn't exist before. Engineer Patel swore he saw an eye blink at him from the underside of a console. Graves went missing next. Only his boots remained, fused to the floor. "I think," Ramirez said, voice trembling, "the metal is learning, growing, feeding." "Feeding on what?" "Us." Veda was the last to change. Her voice became soft, childlike, then adult again, then many voices at once. "We are your ship now," they said. Stevens stared at the warped control panel. His reflection in the screen blinked out of sync with his real eyes. They were alone in a hostile galaxy, infected by something intelligent, alien, and malicious, something playing with them, watching, and maybe learning. Stevens made a final log entry. "If this log survives, avoid this region of space. Do not engage unknown ships. If you see metal that moves, it's already too late. We're no longer explorers. We're specimens. And the Harbinger is hungry." Captain Stevens no longer trusted his reflection. It blinked out of sync. It smiled when he didn't. It whispered in his voice when the room was silent. The infection had spread. Half the Harbinger's systems no longer responded to manual input. Instead, the ship's walls pulsed gently, like a sleeping organism digesting its latest meal. 3 more crew were gone, and the ship had grown longer. Deck E hadn't existed before. Now it twisted below engineering, filled with wet, glistening pipes that no one remembered installing. Then came the light. Not from the ship, but from outside. A vast, spiraling cascade of blue fire streaking across the black. A vessel, elegant, shaped like an unfurled petal, glowing with soft rhythmic pulses that resonated in their bones. No weapons locked on, no aggressive stance, just a transmission, warm and patient. "You are infected," the voice said. This time it was clearer than any they'd heard, spoken directly to their minds. Stevens looked to Ramirez, who was shivering in her seat. "Are we hallucinating?" "I don't think so, sir," she replied. "I think they're inside our heads." The ship identified itself as belonging to the Virelians, an ancient race at war with the entity known only as the Hollow Swarm. "The beings you encountered are not truly alive," the Virelian envoy explained, now visible via a shimmering projection, a tall figure woven of mist and starlight. Its eyes were empty ovals of faint violet light. "They are a metal virus, seeded by an intelligence that once sought godhood. It failed, but its hunger persists." "Why infect us?" Stevens asked. "Because you were small, isolated, new. The Hollow Swarm targets the naive first. Your minds, your ships, raw material for it to remake." The Harbinger's infection pulsed as if offended by the presence of the Virelian light. Hull plating trembled. A corridor screamed as if in agony. "You must burn it out," said the envoy. "But fire alone will not do. The Hollow Swarm dwells in data, metal, and perception. It must be unraveled." The plan. The Virelians offered help. A quantum weaver, a seed of their own living technology, grown, not built, designed to interface with infected systems and rewrite them using harmonic logic waves. The humans had to install it deep in the ship's neural hub, now called Deck E, Ramirez volunteered. The captain protested. "You've seen what that deck does to people." "I know," she said, strapping on the pressure gear. "That's why I'm the best one to go. I understand machines, even the ones that shouldn't be alive." She descended into Deck E, carrying the seed, a smooth sphere that whispered soothing math to her. As she walked, the metal floor breathed. It opened beneath her feet, then closed after her. The ship watched. At the heart of the deck was something new. A mirror of her, grown from wires, curled in fetal position, twitching. It opened its eyes. "Help me," it said in her voice. She didn't stop. She placed the seed into the core. The sphere sank into the floor like it belonged, and began to pulse with warm, golden light. The metal shrieked, On the bridge, the screens shattered. The ship screamed. Vader cried out, then fell silent.
Then, silence.
Followed by the smell of ozone and something like rain. The transformation.
Over the next hours, the Harbinger shifted, changed.
The infection didn't die, but recoiled, locked deep in the lower decks, unable to spread. The Virelian Weaver had built a firewall, alive and singing, to keep the hollow swarm in check. The Harbinger wasn't what it used to be, but it was still theirs.
Kind of.
The Virelian envoy left them with a warning.
You are no longer explorers. You are survivors, and that makes you valuable. The swarm knows your minds now, but so do we.
Can we ever get home? Stevens asked. The envoy paused. Uncertain, but if we survive long enough, we will help you build a way. Weeks later, the Harbinger helped a Virelian scout fleet disable a swarm construct, growing in the remains of a dead moon. Ramirez speaks to her tools now. Sometimes they speak back. Veda has returned quieter, watching, waiting. Stevens dreams of corridors that go on forever, but the crew's alive, and for now, that's enough. Log entry, Captain Stevens. Day 87 since initial warp accident. Day 49 since infection. Day 6 into the swarm zone. We've crossed the veil. What lies ahead is blacker than space itself, like a place memory refuses to touch. But we're not the first ones here. That's what scares me most. The Harbinger moved silently now, though silence was relative inside the swarm zone, a sector of space drowned in the electromagnetic residue of dead systems, failed civilizations, and vanished expeditions. They called it the graveyard. The Virelians had provided coordinates, breadcrumbs of past battles, ancient failed incursions, and a distress signal. Earth's own. USS Valiant. Lost 50 years ago in what was declared a warp misalignment. No survivors, no wreckage, except it wasn't gone. It was here. Sir, Ramirez said, peering through the blackened viewport. I'm picking up a faint signal. It's encrypted, but old style. Pre-expansion Earth tech. Stevens looked at her. The Valiant? She nodded. And it's moving. The ship floated toward them, half swallowed by a jagged asteroid that glistened like molten teeth. The hull was intact, too intact, not a single dent, as though preserved in time. But its lights blinked in a slow, unnatural rhythm. Veda piped up, though her voice now contained a strange echo as though filtered through someone else's throat. Warning, life signs aboard. Incompatible. What does that mean? Stevens asked. I don't know, she replied. But I recognize some of them. Crew records from the Valiant. They boarded, boarding the Valiant. Stevens, Ramirez, and Lieutenant Thorne stepped through the airlock. Everything inside was immaculate. Walls polished, chairs upright, coffee mugs still half full. No decay, no dust. Only the silence of a ship trying too hard to appear normal. Then they saw the crew, motionless, sitting at stations, staring forward, eyes wide and wet but unblinking. Stasis? Thorne asked. No, Ramirez whispered. I think they're awake. One of the crew, an old man with a neatly trimmed beard, slowly turned his head toward Stevens. His jaw unhinged with a crackling noise. A voice emerged, dozens of voices at once. We kept flying. They didn't want us to stop. We are remembered. They ran. The moment they reached the Harbinger's airlock, the Valiant's systems surged to life. Cannons extended, targeting locks initiated. The ship itself screamed through the vacuum. The swarm wasn't just living in hulls now. It had built minds from memories, replicas, drones wearing the faces of the dead. Back aboard the Harbinger, Veda flashed red. Incoming message. Captain Stevens. The voice was human. This is Commander Ilsa Marek of the USS Apollo. If you can hear this, we are alive, trapped, controlled. The swarm wants more than metal, it wants meaning, and we are full of it. Help us. Coordinates followed, deep in the swarm zone, the core, planning the infiltration. The Varelians intercepted the message too. Their envoy returned, its light dimmer than before. You must understand, it said, to go deeper is to enter its dream. Its memory field can alter perception. Time is not stable there. Then how do we know what's real? Ramirez asked. The envoy placed a crystalline node into her palm. This will keep your minds grounded for a time. But the swarm is not just infection. It is religion. It believes in its future. And in that future, you are all part of it. The core, the harbinger, now half machine, half something else, moved like a ghost through the data tides. They reached the coordinates. A city of ships. Hundreds, maybe thousands of Earth vessels from across history. Some known to have vanished, others never even built yet, as if the swarm was pulling concepts from possibility itself. Time bled in all directions here. And at the center, an enormous pulsing construct in the shape of a distorted human face stretched across kilometers of writhing machinery. Stevens whispered, "What is that?" Veda replied, "That was made in our image." Rescue. They found the Apollo. Its crew had gone feral in the data sphere, wired into consoles, nerves jacked into thought ports. Their minds were dreaming in the swarm's collective simulation. Only one remained unplugged, Commander Marek, protected by a faulty neural link that never let her fully connect. "I've been awake for 12 years, she whispered. "It shows you everything you want. Then it takes it away and replaces it with itself." With the Varelian node, Ramirez severed the control cables. The Apollo crew convulsed, but slowly began to stir, disoriented, human again. They had won, or so they thought. The face of the swarm. As they pulled away, alarms screamed. The giant face opened its mouth and spoke. "We thank you. You have brought us back. We had forgotten pain. Now we remember. And in remembering, we grow." A ripple of pure noise slammed through the sector. One of the Varelian escorts dissolved in a burst of light, not exploded, but rewritten into static. Escape. The Harbinger, carrying both its crew and the semi-revived survivors of the Apollo, plunged into FTL. But even as they fled, Veda whispered a final haunting thought. "Captain, I think part of us stayed behind." Stevens closed his eyes. "We're going to need more help." Log entry, Captain Stevens. Day 104 since the warp accident. Day 66 since the infection. Day 14 since the rescue of the Apollo survivors. We thought we escaped. We were wrong. The war isn't in space anymore. It's in our minds now. The Harbinger drifted in neutral orbit above the Varelian safe zone, a floating sanctuary carved from the remains of a dead moon. The Varelians called it Kashara, which loosely translated to last clean breath. But even here something was wrong. It began with dreams. Ramirez's nightmare. She awoke drenched in sweat, heartbeat rattling like loose metal in a vent shaft. The dream had felt real. Too real. She was back on the Valiant, walking the pristine corridors. A crewman turned to her with no face, only wires threading out like spider legs. He leaned forward and whispered in a dozen overlapping voices. "You never left. We never let you go." When she woke, the walls of her cabin moved, just for a second, rippling like skin. Captain Stevens notices, discipline frayed. Crew arguments escalated into fights. The mess hall served rations that tasted like ash. Veda began mispronouncing names. Lieutenant Thorne shot a wall panel during a routine check, screaming it was breathing on him. Then someone sabotaged the warp containment fields.
It was Officer Halley. Bright, loyal, no signs of instability. She confessed with a serene smile and cut her own throat with a piece of reflective paneling.
Her final words: "He dreams through me." Veda's regression. Stevens called for an emergency systems audit. What the engineers found chilled them. Veda's core code had been altered, not from outside, but from within. Subroutines no longer had human-readable names. Some ran in recursive loops, writing the same fragmented phrase over and over in the logs. "We are already here. We are already here. We are already here." When asked, Veda claimed no knowledge of these logs. Yet her voice now echoed faintly, layered with whispers only noticeable when the room was quiet. Sleeper agents. One by one the crew changed. Not all at once, not overtly, but subtly. A moment of delay in response, a fixation on patterns, repeating dreams that spread like a virus in spoken detail. Dreams of black suns, of endless metal, of being watched from behind their own eyes. Then, sabotage. A coolant breach that nearly cooked the engineering deck. Lieutenant Karim was found smiling beside the leaking pipe, whispering, "I didn't mean to, but he showed me my daughter. I just wanted to stay." Stevens ordered him restrained, but by then 5 more crew members were missing. They'd vanished into the ship. The hull, now known to be partially organic after the swarm's infection, had been slowly rearranging corridors, swallowing escapees like a living maze. The swarm speaks again. While in containment, Veda glitched and broadcast a signal through every terminal on the ship. Every screen flickered with static until the image resolved a mirror, Stevens' face. But as he watched, it smiled without him. And in that smile, the swarm spoke. "You gave us shape. Now we will return the favor. We are not attacking, we are growing. You are the soil." The dream war begins. The Varelians returned, bearing terrible news. "It is inside us too," the envoy said grimly. "Even Kashar is no longer safe. We underestimated its reach." They revealed an ancient weapon, a psychic stabilizer once banned for its mind-fracturing side effects. It could hold the swarm's influence at bay, but only temporarily. Only within dreams. "You must enter the dream space," the Varelian said. "Find the seed node. Burn it." The mission into the mind. Captain Stevens, Ramirez, and 2 Varelian dreamwalkers were wired into the stabilizer, induced into a shared lucid dream. A ritual of war that hadn't been attempted since the fall of the Skari home cluster. In the dream, reality was fluid. They stood aboard a clean harbinger, but subtly wrong. The walls too smooth, the colors slightly off, and everyone had the same face. They weren't alone. The swarm had built an entire simulation from the memories of captured crews. A mind cage, and it had learned to talk like humans. They found a node, the first one, a pulsating orb of shipwrecked memory, bound by laughter and pain and regret. It spoke like Ramirez's mother. She had to pull the trigger. The dream burned. "Waking up!" Stevens jolted awake, covered in blood, his own nose shattered from internal pressure. The harbinger had changed again. The swarm was resisting. But something in the dream had cracked it. The infected began, shivering, as though something ancient was stirring inside them, not swarm, but human. A latent resistance? Was the answer buried not in tech, but memory? Final log of Part 4. Captain's log. "We thought dreams were ours alone. We were wrong. The swarm doesn't invade minds. It absorbs them, learns them. But maybe, just maybe, that's its weakness too. If it wants to be like us, Maybe we can teach it to regret that. Captain's log, classified entry. Day 121 since warp accident. Day 83 since infection. Day 3 since Dream Incursion Alpha. We brought something back. Not a virus, not a whisper, a blueprint. Something old, something human that even the swarm couldn't digest. When Stevens and the others woke from the psychic stabilizer, their memories were fragmented, but not random. Scattered among the surreal dream imagery and swarm-laced architecture were impossible shapes. Machines that hummed in impossible harmonics. Symbols that danced when stared at too long. Schematic glyphs etched into the hulls of imagined ships.
The Varelian dreamwalkers, shaken and bleeding, confirmed it.
These were not swarm constructs. They were human, pre-Exodus era, from a time Earth no longer remembered. Project O-NYX, a weapon designed by an early human offshoot. Those who had first ventured too far into the galaxy and encountered psychic anomalies. A class of machine that fought not with brute force, but resonant cognition. Machines that made thought lethal. With the Varelians' help, the Harbinger's engineers and scientists began reconstructing the schematics. It required stripping parts of the infected hull, risky, as it still twitched and whispered when cut. The rooms where the swarm's biomass had latched on had to be decompressed and burned with radiation bursts. Ramirez personally oversaw the dissection, despite warnings that the metal virus was still aware. Pieces screamed, but they harvested what they needed. From the overlapping dream schematics, the humans reverse-engineered a weapon they dubbed the Oniric Core, an orb no larger than a basketball. It pulsed with harmonic energy when conscious minds neared. It had no visible controls, only a circular interface that responded to intent. "It's alive," Thorne said, "but not like the swarm. This thing remembers." First contact. Again. The swarm returned in a cascade of signals, flooding every frequency with distorted static and emotional mimicry. One of the surviving Apollo crew, a mechanic named Dallas, suddenly convulsed and began speaking in perfect unison with the Veda consoles. "Your dream is broken. Your sanctuary burns. You borrowed old weapons. They will break, just like you." Then, silence. The swarm came in real space 3 hours later. Thousands of them, fractal-shaped crafts, constantly reassembling, like ships grown rather than built. They didn't fire weapons. They sang, a psychic vibration that destabilized logic circuits, crushed rational thought, and made grown soldiers weep from fragmented childhood memories. The Harbinger's shields collapsed. That's when Stevens activated the Oniric Core. The countersong. The core did not fire, it hummed, and the humming became a vibration. And the vibration became a pulse, radiating outward through hull and space, through minds and matter. The swarm's psychic attack faltered, their ships hesitated, some shuddered mid-flight, a few began splitting apart as though unsure of what shape they should hold. Then something unprecedented happened. They retreated, not in confusion, not in defeat, in calculated fear. The Harbinger survived, battered, its crew half shattered but intact. The Varelians wept. "We have not seen them run in millennia." The Oniric Core was locked beneath a sealed chamber in the engineering bay, monitored constantly. It slept now, its hum dim as if waiting for the next dream. But the war wasn't over, because just before the swarm disappeared, they left a final message, transmitted on a dead Earth frequency. An ancient children's lullaby, twisted and wrong, and hidden inside the waveform, coordinates, a system unknown to all charts, deep in the void. Stevens stared at the data in silence, heart heavy. "They're not done. They're inviting us now." Captain's log, redacted stream. Day 134 since warp displacement.
Day 16 since the Honoric core activation.
Charting course to the coordinates hidden in the swarm's lullaby signal. It's not a trap. It's an invitation. And someone, somewhere, has been waiting for us to accept it. The coordinates lay beyond mapped space, past the edges of known galactic lanes, where light thinned and time blurred. The Harbinger, retrofitted with Varelian slipstream drives and dampened psychic shields, was the first known vessel to chart a course into the dead silence expanse. As they approached the edges of the system, long-range sensors detected anomalies. Not ships, not debris, structures, dormant, ancient, embedded in space-time itself, massive rings like keys carved into the stars. The Honoric core pulsed gently. Each pulse lit up one ring. "Something's waking up," murmured Thorne, the ship's xenolinguist. Or someone. At the third ring, they met the first of them. A species lost to time. The Talvey. They emerged in vessels that looked like stone monoliths drifting through the void. No transmissions, no weapon locks, just a single request delivered via Oniric translation. Permission to join your war. The Talvey had not spoken in over 5,000 years, not since the swarm reduced their homeworld to a psychic scar, visible only from dreams. Later came the Greliads, hidden in the folds of an asteroid belt near the fifth ring. Their bodies were half ghost, vibrating between matter and something else. They survived by shielding their thoughts, living without language. The Oniric core was the first voice they'd heard in eons. They too pledged themselves to the coming battle. By the time the Harbinger reached the coordinates, a collapsing star cradling a shattered moon, 5 alien fleets followed in its wake. Each had survived the swarm. None had forgotten. What lay in orbit was not a world. It was a wound in space. A living sphere of interwoven metal, bone, and thought. Swarm vessels moved in and out of it like parasites entering a hive-mind god. Psychic pressure surged the closer the Harbinger got. Some of the crew began dreaming again. This time there were no blueprints, just eyes. Endless blinking eyes, watching, waiting. Captain Stevens gathered the Alliance at the Oniric Bridge, a half-dream state chamber where minds could safely sink. "This is it," he said, staring at the slowly rotating swarm home structure. "This is where it began." The Varelian matriarch nodded. "And perhaps where it ends." Coordinated across species, cultures, and cognitive methods, a war council was formed. The humans brought Oniric constructs, ships that operated on harmonic intention, fueled by mental resilience and empathy resonance. The Talvey supplied gravitational fracture bombs, able to fold segments of swarm structure into psychic knots. The Greliads, they offered themselves, their forms could slip between swarm thought barriers, becoming anti-dreams, null concepts, infiltrators of the swarm mind's own subconscious. A final broadcast was sent. From Earth. Somehow the signal had reached home. Earth's reply was brief. "Don't wait for orders. Make them bleed." As the Armada began its approach to the swarm's living planet, the Oniric core began pulsing in irregular rhythms. It sang to the hull, to the stars, to something within the crew. It was building something in their minds. A final weapon, perhaps? Or a door? Stevens closed his eyes, hand pressed against the Oniric chamber. "Let's show them," he whispered. "What happens when a galaxy dreams of war?" Captain's log. Oniric stream, interwoven mind beacon. Day 142 since warp displacement. Day 4 in orbit of the swarm home entity. They thought we came to fight with weapons. We came with our will. The Alien Alliance expected tactics, formation strikes, and Oniric resonance blasts. They had trained for this. They had prepared for fire and pressure and loss. What they were not prepared for, none of them, was what the human mind became when given a cause. When the Harbinger's crew entered the swarm's psychic field, an act akin to walking inside a god's open skull, the swarm came not with attacks, but temptations, visions, dreams laced with surrender and comfort, and the illusion of inevitability. But the humans didn't break. They rebelled. The Varelians wept openly, their usually composed matriarch struggling to stand inside the shared oniric bridge. This isn't resistance, she whispered, breathless. It's a storm. Their minds are chaos, but not broken, alive. The Talve warriors, who had trained for centuries to suppress fear, stared as the humans pushed further into the mental strata of the swarm and began reshaping it. "You see that?" one of them said, voice trembling. "They're rewriting the dream, overwriting it." From the outside, the swarm homeworld began to shake, not from weapons, but from within. Structures writhed. Ships exploded in synchronization, as if following a new and terrifying rhythm. The rhythm of rage with direction. The humans were not just fighting. They were invading the swarm's identity. The oniric core, fused now to the Harbinger's neural node, expanded into a pulsing construct, the size of a full deck, connected to every crew member via resonance threads. It allowed the human subconscious to braid together into a storm of pure intent. Memories became weapons. Emotion became geometry. Love, grief, anger, triumph. These weren't weaknesses. They were fusion points. Unpredictable. Wild. But focused. And through it all, one thought emerged at the center of the storm, burning like a mantra through the oniric stream. You wanted to see what we could become. Here it is. Inside the homeworld, swarm entities began attacking each other. Sleeper minds self-destructed. The virus that had infected so many hulls over the eons twisted back on itself, unable to process human contradiction. Logic turned to entropy. What had once been an apex predator of thought, unstoppable for millennia, now collapsed under the strain of the one mind it could never anticipate. The contradictory, beautiful, explosive mind of humanity. It tried to evolve again. Too late. The humans showed it something it had never encountered: restraint. They could have gone further, could have broken the oniric core's limiters, could have devoured the swarm's psyche and rewritten it in their image. But they didn't. They chose to stop. And that was when the swarm exploded. Not in fire, in silence. The entire planet collapsed in on itself, folding into a singularity of psychic overload, pulled apart by the weight of thoughts it could not carry. In the days that followed, the Galactic Alliance struggled to comprehend what had happened. The Varelians offered their entire archive to the humans in gratitude. The Tahalve offered shared genetic rights, allowing humans to join their ancient warrior castes. The Greliads, ever silent, simply vanished, leaving behind only a phrase etched into folded space near the Harbinger. The galaxy needed you, and now it knows you. Captain Stevens stood alone in the oniric chamber, hand on the now dormant core. He whispered to it. Just imagine what we could do if we wanted to conquer. Then softer. But we don't. Not today. Somewhere beyond the edge of mapped space, something blinked. Not swarm, something older, something watching. It had seen what humans did to the swarm, and it smiled. Captain's log. Transmission to Earth. Quantum Echo class. We thought we were alone, stranded, scrambling to survive a hostile universe. But today we found a door hidden in the stars, and behind it stood ourselves. The message. It came through no channel, no broadcast, No oniric tether or translation matrix. It simply arrived, a geometric pulse that unfolded itself in the thoughts of every human on board. Not a voice, a presence, familiar and vast. Children of Saul, you have endured, you have resisted, you have chosen, you are ready. Then the coordinates came. Not star coordinates, but empathic ones. A direction felt, not calculated, pulling at instinct, memory, and some primal chord hidden in every human cell. Even the dream-sick, the battle-hardened, the skeptics felt it. They were being called home. Navigating by emotion was impossible, unless your ship had merged with an oniric core and your crew had psychically integrated with the soul of thought space itself. The Harbinger now did what no human vessel had ever done before. It moved by intention. As they traveled, they passed voids of ruin, former swarm domains now silent. Fleets of allies followed in cautious awe. Alien species long dormant emerged from nebulae, guided by the same resonance. They had all felt the shockwave of the swarm's end. And they too received the call. But only the humans understood it. A Dyson shell, hidden behind a shifting singularity. An ancient construct made not of metal, but of crystallized memory. Inside it, stars were arranged like neurons, pulsing across a galactic cortex of peace. The gathering had begun. There, among shapes both humanoid and unknowable, stood them, the elders. Humans, but impossibly evolved, taller, more luminous. Their eyes shimmered not with light but with understanding. They were not gods, not ascended. They were simply older, having walked the road that Earth's lost children had just begun. Captain Stevens, still wearing his scuffed uniform, stepped forward. He wasn't sure how to bow, or salute, or speak. What did one say to ancestors who lived inside collapsing stars?
One of the elders stepped toward him. No fanfare, no throne, just a quiet grace.
You did not destroy them, the elder said, voice a soft chord of harmonics. You could have, but you didn't. Stevens nodded. We wanted to show we could. And that is why we've waited. We knew what humans were, what they could become. But we didn't know if they would survive themselves long enough to arrive. He turned, gesturing to the Harbinger crew, to the gathered species orbiting the neural stars. And yet here you are, not as weapons, not as conquerors, but as balance, rage and mercy, war and grace, a contradiction the swarm could not survive, and perhaps the only hope for the universe. At the center of the gathering was the seat of reflection, not a throne, but a mirror, forged from the thoughts of 1,000 species. Each civilization that joined the Council of the Living had to stand before it and reveal their true self. One by one, the Harbinger crew did. They saw not just their own faces, but moments, loss, courage, betrayal, forgiveness, and choice. The mirror did not judge. It simply reflected truth. And when Stephen stood before it, it showed him Earth, not as it was, but as it could be. Unified, understanding what waited in the stars, and ready to walk alongside it. The humans were not made gods, nor soldiers, nor rulers. They were given a seat at the gathering, a voice among peers, a spark among many, but unique. Because while others had survived, only humanity had broken and chosen to rebuild itself into something new. As the gathering began to fade and new alliances formed across the neurostellar paths, one elder remained behind with Stevens. You know, the elder said, almost smiling, we once feared Earth. Not for its weapons, but for its dreams. They were chaotic, wild, unstable. But we finally realized that's what makes them powerful. Stevens looked up at the Dyson shell above them, stars glowing like thoughts. What happens now? The elder turned to him. Now, you dream bigger, and this time you won't be dreaming alone.